We were talking about the kind of wrapping up the book of Revelation. We're on clear up to chapter 20. There's 22 chapters, so we're getting near the end where the disciple has overcome pretty much all things, and it's projected to where the Christ is manifest in the disciple, as well as if we project this interpretation to the world itself. And he says, and I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were open. And another book was open, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books according to their works. So we had this great judgment at the end of times. In other words, we're approaching the end of we're at the end of the Piscean age, the beginning of a new age, and we have realizations that the disciples of the world comes to, as well as the world itself. And he saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were open, and another book was open. What is overlooked by almost all the interpreters of the book of Revelation is there's two sets of books. The books were open, and then another book was open, which is the book of life. Now, it doesn't give a name for the first set of books. So what is that first set of books? There's a book of life, and then there's another set of books. Now, and the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books. Now, you notice it says the dead were judged. So, what about those that aren't dead? What about those that are alive? What is the difference between the dead and the living? Because one is the book of life. So the dead aren't judged by the book of life, because the book of life contains the life of those who have the life of Christ in them. Okay, if there are, if the disciple is in contact with the inner Christ, then he is alive. Remember what Jesus said, I am the vine and you are the branches. If you're connected to the vine, then you will have life. If you're severed from the vine, then you will be as a vine that withers and dies. Because the vine must be connected to the whole to have the life, or the branch must be connected to the whole, to the vine, to have the life flow through it. Okay, so we have two sets of books, one to judge the dead and one to judge the living. Okay, the dead were judged out of those things which were written in those books. Now, what's interesting is the two sets of books to judge the dead and the living. The dead are those that haven't made the contact with the inner Christ. They haven't made soul contact. They just go by their astral connection to their emotional body. They were very controlled by their emotional body and their emotional self and their lower self, their lower mind and the lower emotions.
Base desire.
And they're not connected they're not connected to the living spirit. So these are the dead. These are the dead. And that says the dead will be brought forth to stand before God. Now, at the end of times and the life of the disciple, the end of times of an age, those who are dead spiritually are come to face with certain truths that come from the spirit, the Christ within. And the Christ within verifies anything that's true is part of the consciousness of the Christ, whereas many things that are false are embraced by the lower personality. And so the books, the first set of books is a history of all the things done by those in the personality state in the world. Those who are seeking for power, those who are seeking for money, those who are seeking for fame, and those who want to suppress others for their own benefit. And basically, when we read about the history of the world, we read about the history of the dead, the history of people that were not impressed by the Christ within. Okay. Probably 95% at least of the world's history concern the dead. And on the other side, there's a set of books that gives a true record of those people, of the history of the people that are dead, dead to the contact of the inner Christ. And the second group of books on the other side are the book of life, and this contains the true history of the people who are alive in Christ and what they did in this world. And some of them are known to our history, and many of them are not known, but they have received verification of certain truths from the inner Christ, and they became alive, and they did their best to spread these teachings, to spread these truths. And many of them were not recorded in the books of the world, but they are recorded in the true book of life. And eventually we will be able to see these two sets of books. And the great part about witnessing and seeing these two sets of books is that we will be able to see the actual true history and what was false and what was really true. Now, we have these two sides, as we talked about earlier, on the political system, that they're arguing like crazy with each other. And what is true and what is false? Where is the true middle way that's taught by the Buddha that we need to find and embrace and follow? And but when we look at these books, when the disciple eventually is able to look at these two sets of books, he will be able to see where the truth actually laid, or whatever the word is. Let's take a controversial subject. Abortion is very controversial. Okay, so where's the truth on abortion? Should we have any abortion or not, or under certain circumstances? You can't hardly find any two people that will agree with this. When these books are open, we will see where the true point is in the life of each person that had to make a choice in this matter. We will see where the point of truth was, where was the best decision that could have been made when these books are open.
Are these books the Akashic records, or is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, the Akashic records contain both books, the Book of Life and the other books, but they give us a record of the outward history of the world, and then the inner history, which contains the record of the life of the disciples. So when we get to total enlightenment, or to the other side, and undergo this judgment, we will be able to see, follow the life of many disciples that were not recorded in history, and see their struggles, and see the good that they did accomplish, and see that they influenced maybe only half a dozen people in their life, but that half a dozen were reborn and maybe changed the world later on. And so we will see how the light uh, was spread through the book of life, whereas those who are the dead, they will come to a great reckoning, not only in the afterlife when the books are open for them in the afterlife, and this is what's called the life review. You've probably heard about this, and the out of the thousands of near-death experiences, a high percentage of them talk about receiving a life review. And also, out of thousands and thousands of hypnotic regressions to the life between lives, everybody talks about getting the life review. And in the life review, you're shown your life and you're shown it as it really is. And you're able to judge yourself. And then when you see that you really made screwy decisions, you will see how that decision was really wrong. And when you made a wrong judgment on a person, according to the life review data that we have, you actually see yourself as being that person, and you see why that person did what he did, and you will often see that your judgment of him was just totally wrong. And so you, in this situation, you're receiving, having the books open for the dead because you are dead to the truth. And you see the truth as it really is because now you are able to see through the eyes of the soul in the life review. And so you see these books open and they judge you. And you think, boy, I was sure stupid in making that judgment because this person really had a good reason to do what he did. And, or, if I was in his situation, I would have probably done the same thing. If I was under his, if I went through everything he went through.
You're talking a little bit about this movie, Defending Your Life.
Yeah, that was a good movie.
I love that movie.
I don't know. Brooks was in it, and what's her name was in it?
Meryl
Meryl
Streep.
Streep.
Meryl
Yeah,
Streep, yeah.
in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how people think they're much more enlightened or advanced or evolved or do much more good than they really do. That's the point of the movie. One of them.
Yeah, concerning this judgment, Paul made this interesting statement. He says, "For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know even as I am also known." So in other words, we see through a glass darkly. We see ourselves in a reflection of a glass, but we see the reflection imperfectly. And we make judgments imperfectly. But then when we have our life review, we will see things as they really are, and we will understand, boy, I really screwed up on this thing. I got to do better in my next life. I got to do some planning here so I don't make that mistake again. Now, this also opens up in this life because through the principle of harmony through conflict, we have this tremendous conflict right now. We have the conflict of the extreme right and left, and they hate each other and they're coming in conflict. But eventually, some truth is going to emerge out of this conflict. And when it's all over, those who are dead to the life of the Christ will be faced with a truth that they don't want to accept. And it will be a very difficult thing for them. And this is why it's called death and hell, because it's a hellish experience to be on the wrong side of the truth and then be faced with a truth that becomes obvious, and you pretty much have to accept it or deny reality. And when those points come, it's very difficult. And it's difficult to talk about it in modern society because there's such conflict and so little agreement, but we can look in the past with slavery, for instance. The society all around the world accepts slavery as a necessary evil. And then when it comes down to the tension become stronger and stronger. In ancient times, slavery was accepted and there was no conflict over slavery because everybody just accepted it. And then as it began to permeate the American states, a lot of people didn't accept it. And when a large quantity didn't accept it and others did, then it produced a point of tension, tremendous conflict between these two. And the conflict created a tremendous war, and it was finally resolved. And after the Confederacy lost the war, they were in hell because they had to accept that slavery was at an end. And that was very difficult for them to accept. And so they went through death and hell, as talked about in the book of Revelation. And then after generations passed, now everybody accepts slavery as something that we don't want. Okay. And then it says, and the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead which was in them, and they were judged every man according to their works. Now it says the sea gave up her dead. What does that mean?
Well, C stands for people, a mob of people, or the emotional world, one or the other.
Right. Sea is composed of water. Water is a symbol of the emotions, often here in this case, the lower emotions. Okay, and remember, the beast controls people through the lower emotions. Okay, so the sea gave up her dead. And those that were controlled by the lower emotions are dead to the higher emotions and to the higher feelings of the spirit. And so the sea gave up the dead which were in it. And when the new age comes fully in, and people accept certain basic truths of goodwill and peace and harmony, those that hung on to the old Piscean flaws have to give up their beliefs and transition over to the new. So the lower emotions gave up the dead that were in it, and these people that were governed by the lower emotions had to face their flaws in thinking and feeling and embrace that which was new.
That's what we just read about last week, about letting go of preconceived notions um, uh, and fixed ideas so that new truths can be received and presented.
Yeah.
Kind of on track. We're getting bombarded with that from every angle.
Yeah, right. And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire, and this is the second death. So death symbolizes those who are not connected to the Christ within and to the truths revealed, and hell is living in that situation. So people that are governed by the lower emotions and controlled by the beast and controlled by outer authorities rather than the inner authority, that give the outer more credibility than the inner, these were cast into a lake of fire. And as we talked about earlier, the fire is symbolic of enlightenment. So these were cast in a situation where they are faced with truths that they cannot deny. And this is the second death because it causes them to become dead to the errors that they were living by. because most people that's governed by the lower emotions live by many errors in their life. Their thinking is in error, their feelings are in error, and the second death is where those errors are corrected. So they become dead to that which was holding them back, and they're forced to embrace certain things that are true. And whosoever was not written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. So as I said, there was two books. The book, if you're in the book of life, it means you're connected to the inner source, the inner soul. You have soul contact. You get impulses and feelings and thoughts come to you from your inner self that guide you correctly. And if you do this, you're written in the book of life because you are alive. You're alive because you're connected to the vine. But if you're not found in there, then you're cast into this lake of fire. And the lake of fire symbolizes a situation where you're forced to confront the truth. And once you're forced to confront the truth, then it's a difficult situation for people. A lot of people would rather die than confront the real truth, a truth that will actually change their mind and reveal their errors. Many people would rather give their bodies to be burned than admit that they were wrong. Okay. Now, we'll move on to chapter 21. Just got 2 chapters left. And this talks about the New Jerusalem. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, and the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. Okay, well, he saw a new heaven. What was the matter with the old heaven?
New is better.
Heaven is symbolic of the spiritual teachings that we have here upon the planet. The spiritual teachings we have, for instance, the standard born-again Christian teaches, just believe in Jesus and you'll be saved, and that's all you need to do, okay? Well, that creates their view of the spirit or heaven here. And what we're going to have as we move into the new age, and also as the disciple moves from the lower personality into the contact with the inner Christ, is you move to a new spiritual embrace. Okay, so you move to a new heaven. So the trouble with the old heaven is it had a lot of distortions and flaws and incorrect teachings within it. And you look at any of these religions and what they believe in, you can't find any two of them that agree with each other. So obviously there's a lot of flaws in them somewhere. And so this old heaven, or the old way of teaching and learning, needs to be replaced by new. So he sees a new heaven, or a new teaching, and a new earth. What would be the new earth? The earth
I feel like,
what's say?
sorry, I was just gonna say, when I hear New Earth, especially after that description of New Heaven, it feels like a new way to embody those teachings. Like it's bringing that spiritual truth that you've got in the New Heaven all the way down to like the daily living or the embodiment of humanity.
Right. Yeah, you're on the right track there. In other words, the earth symbolizes practicality. So the heaven symbolizes kind of the more theoretical teachings of that. And the earth symbolizes our practical everyday living. In our practical everyday living, we often pursue all kinds of things just for our comfort and for ourselves and for our enjoyment. And with the new way of looking at things, we look more, we will turn more towards service, because service is the keynote word of the Aquarian age. Sacrifice was the key word of the Piscean age, which is now passing. And now we're going into service. So the new earth, the new practical way of living involves not only just self-fulfillment, but working on behalf of the whole, on behalf of humanity. For the
And
first,
it's also a way of seeing beyond the illusion of what appears to be.
yeah. And so the first heaven and the first earth has passed away, and there was no more sea. And sea was symbolic of what?
Lower emotions.
Lower emotions. So the people, when the Aquarian age is fully in, people will not be controlled by the lower emotions anymore. There will be lower emotions, but they won't be the prime controller of people. Like Hitler got up and spoke, and he really appealed to the lower emotions of the people, and he was able to really sway them. But when the Aquarian age is fully in, there will be no more of that type of control of people by stimulating their lower emotions. They will have enough common sense, enough inner connection to be able to see beyond that and not be so deceived as they were in the past. Okay. And I, John, saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. Okay, the New Jerusalem symbolizes a new way of living, a new way of looking at things. We're transitioning from sacrificing to the authorities of the world to service for humanity. And we won't have an actual physical city come descend on the earth, but we will have a city of people that are in contact with the inner Christ. And these are symbolic of the building of the New Jerusalem that descends from God out of heaven. And the true heaven is within, of course, and this means that that which is within is registered by those who teach from without. So, and this produces the symbolic descent of the New Jerusalem.
Well, doesn't Jerusalem also mean city of peace? So we'll have a peaceful scenario where people will draw down their higher ideals in a more peaceful way.
And the prophecy is that with the coming of Christ, we will have 1,000 years of peace. And so the city of peace really goes along with that prophecy also. And I heard a great voice of heaven saying, "Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he shall dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God." Okay, this is telling us that this is not telling us that some being from a throne will come down and live with us, but it's talking about the descent or our connection to the God within. And when we are connected to the God within, then the tabernacle of God is with men. And when we were with a group of people, that have this connection. The tabernacle of God is with us even to a greater extent. And so when God is recognized as being within us, which is always there, but we do not look and we do not see. But when we look and when we see, then the tabernacle of the presence of God descends with us. And when this happens with a large enough number of people, then the transition takes place from the world being ruled by those in the personality and the lower self to a world that is ruled by people that are in contact with the inner Christ, and that is what's going to change the world. One by one, the rulers of the world will be replaced with those who register the inner Christ, and that will happen over a period of, I would guess, about another 150, 200 years. We will see that take place in the world itself. But it has to start with us. We have to be ruled by the inner voice rather than the outer. So what do you think here, Tyler? Do you think, are you ruled by the inner voice?
I think most of the time.
Okay, yeah, if you are, then you one of the ones that make the step and you have a connection with other people. And who knows, Tyler's going to run for office, national office in a couple more years. And he might be one of the few out there to begin to transition the world from the outer voice to the inner voice. And so let's hope that happens. Okay, is any comments anybody wants to make before we sign off?
I just had one a couple weeks ago. I mentioned that Neil Diamond wrote a song where he had one hand up and one hand to God, because that's what he's there for, and one hand out to serve. I think was a very enlightened songwriter. And that song came from Brother Love's Traveling Salvation Show.
Oh yeah, that's a good song.
So it's a really good song, and it'll probably be on the airways just because I brought it up. But there are a lot of artists, especially musical artists, that have helped to herald the new age through their musical teachings as well. He was one, Beatles was another, a lot of.
Yeah, I think the music of the late 50s to the 80s was really brought a lot of light to the world.
Kind of went downhill after the 80s, didn't it?
Yeah, I think so, but
I mean, others might not think so, but I kind of do.
Yeah. Of course, I remember when even Elvis was popular, everybody thought he represented the devil. The older people did. And then the Beatles come on, they really thought they were from the devil, even worse than Elvis.
Yeah, and you almost got to go see them.
Yeah, just about. Okay, my friends, we finally solidified the gathering date. I think it's from the September 25th to the 28th. So those of you who are considering that, mark that on your calendar.
What happened to the 11th through the 14th?
We had several people say that was a really bad date for them, so we thought we'd switch it.
So 25 to what?
25th to 28th
Thanks.
of September. Okay, my friends, good to talk to you, and we will see you again next week.
No, well,
Thank
next Tuesday.
Oh, next Tuesday after Sunday. So let me get you the date here. That'll be on the
Later in the week.
22nd on a Tuesday.
All right.
Till then, may the Spirit be with you.
May we rise above the seas.
Yeah,
Thank you. Good Easter to everybody.
yeah.